you can probably hear or see if you're watching this on YouTube that this episode is a little bit different. So I'm super excited to share our first official episode of the Skin Check with Jenn. The Skin Check is a monthly segment hosted by me, Jenn Schultz, as an opportunity for L.U.V ambassadors and other skincare advocates to have a platform to share their story, offer advice, and then also offer support to others. So this month, I'm super excited. We have Leah as our first guest. Leah Adams is a fellow L.U.V ambassador. She is a good friend of mine. She received her Bachelor's of Science from Ohio University in Child and Family Studies with a minor in psychology. She then received her dual master's degree in social science administration and nonprofit management from Case Western Reserve University. Leah is the program manager for the National Kidney Foundation's Northern Ohio office, and she has been with the organization for almost 4 years, celebrating her anniversary next month in March. In this role, she manages the planning and implementation of all NCAF programs in the Northern Ohio Territory so that she can support patients, caregivers, and raise awareness in our community, as well as educate healthcare professionals. On a more personal note, Leah she's an avid runner as well as a melanoma survivor, and she loves to travel. Ever since she was personally touched by skin cancer, she's been able to turn her life around for the better, become a skincare and mental health care advocate, and also as a daughter of a stage 4 metastatic melanoma patient. So she wants to use hers and her dad's story to not only inspire change and hope, but also inspire action in regards to melanoma, sun safety, and for people to really protect their largest organ, which is our skin. So, wow, Leah, you are busy. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us. And I'm just super excited to have you as our first guest and want to offer you a chance to share a little bit more both about your journey and your dad's journey in your own words.
Yeah, well, thank you, Jenn, for having me, and for everybody listening, thank you. So my journey started back in 2019 when I noticed a suspicious mole on my chest right here. Before all of this went down in 2019, I did not care about the skin that I was in. I just cared about being tan because I thought when you are tan, you are the most beautiful. And so I used tanning beds on and off for around, I think, close to 10 years. I did not use sunscreen. I would take every opportunity that I had to, lay out in the sun. I took advantage of that, especially living in Ohio where you don't see the sun a lot. A lot of the months out of the year, I feel like I did overtime in the sun in the summertime. And I did that
fellow
for many
Midwesterner, completely relate. Yes.
Yeah. So that kind of was my history. I also, grew up in a house where, I would see like my dad, mow the lawn in the summertime without a shirt on, was not using sunscreen. He was a big golfer, still is a golfer, and just, didn't really protect his skin. He would be super sunburned. My mom also used tanning beds and, didn't really use sunscreen and would also get burned and tan. And so it really wasn't something that I was used to. And so when I became an adult, I was just like, I can do whatever I want. And I choose to be tan because that's when I feel the most beautiful and I think I look the most good. So that's just a little precursor of kind of what led up to 2019. And then I just noticed in 2019, I was getting more moles on my body that weren't there before. And the one on my chest that I spoke about, my mom actually noticed. And before that time, I never went to the dermatologist. I never got a skin check. And at that point in time, I was 26 years old. So at this point in time, I should have already been to the dermatologist, also given the fact that my dad's dad had skin cancer. So there was a, family history of it. I also had pretty fair skin, had a lot of moles. So I met a lot of the risk factors for skin cancer. I just never thought, that could happen to me. So I ended up going in for a full body skin check at the end of 2019. And I purposely did not show the dermatologist the mole on my chest. I was like, well, they're a professional. They'll, know what to catch because they're the professional. And lo and behold, the only mole that they were concerned about on my body was the one on my chest. And they decided to do a skin biopsy where they wanted to see if it was cancerous or if it was okay. The mole looked very odd. It did not have even edges. It was multiple colors. There was a red ring around it. It just looked really funky. And so I was told I get the biopsy results back anywhere from, 3 to 7 days. And that never usually happens. It was 14 days later, I finally got the call, and
Oh, wow.
it was around like the end of a work day. And the second I heard my dermatologist's voice, I knew it wasn't going to be good news. And she said, we got your biopsy results back from the mole that was removed from your chest, and it is stage 1A bordering stage 1B, malignant melanoma. And I was shocked, as you can imagine, because you never think it's going to happen to you until it does. And I had to process receiving a cancer diagnosis over the phone. My family was out of town on vacation. Luckily, I was with my boyfriend that was right next to me when I got the call. But it honestly felt like a moment where your life goes from color to black and white, and you don't even process the words that your dermatologist is saying over the phone, because you never think that you're going to get a cancer diagnosis. And so she basically said, with your family history of the skin cancer, and mind you, my dad, a month before my melanoma, he had a stage 0 melanoma removed from his back. And so they knew about that. They knew about my grandfather, and now they know about me. And given the border of my staging, they wanted to not only get me into surgery as soon as possible to remove it from my chest, they also wanted to take some lymph nodes under my arm near the site of the cancer to see if it potentially spread to my lymph nodes and my organs. And so, on top of you have cancer, plus it could have spread, it was just a lot of overwhelming information all at once. And mind you, that call was maybe not even 10 minutes long. Mm-hmm. And so then I had to sit with that and process that. And so it was pretty not great news to hear. And I got into surgery 2 weeks later. And then I got out of surgery, and mind you, it was a outpatient surgery, yet I was there the entire day. I was under anesthesia. It kind of wiped me out. And one of the first things I asked when I woke up from surgery was, as you heard from my bio, when can I run again? And because that was such a big part of my routine as well in my life. And they said, oh, you won't be running for quite some time because of where the surgery was here and under my arm. It was such a sensitive area. No movement of running of any kind would be good. No sweating, no lifting, none of that. And it took about a month to really heal. And so you can imagine, for someone who ran basically every day for years, to have that taken away from you, to cope with a cancer diagnosis, and to just cope with what does my life look like after this, because I was still waiting for the results to see if the melanoma was all removed and if melanoma spread to my lymph nodes and my organs. So I remembered that month after surgery, having a lot of stitches in me healing, on top of all this mental turmoil and emotional turmoil, I felt very depressed. I felt ashamed. I felt embarrassed because I felt like I gave myself cancer, and that's not a great feeling. And I had to really come to, grips with how I was going to have this experience, either empower me to move forward in a positive way, or if I was just going to continue to have a pity party for myself, which I was having. I was probably around the time that I got the results that luckily they removed all the melanoma from my chest. It did not spread to my lymph nodes and organs, thankfully. that's when I kind of had this epiphany moment where I was like, you know, you got lucky, Leah, and this could have went really south and it could have turned out really bad. It still was bad, but this, like, you can't go back how you used to live your life. You have to take care of your skin. You have to take care of your health. You have to take care of your body. And one of the first things I did in the month after all this happened is I canceled my tanning salon membership, which was very triggering to go back there because I couldn't do it over the phone. And I think I told you this, Jen, one time that at the bottom of the sheet, they ask you reason for cancellation. And I said, because I got melanoma and I got skin cancer and I don't want to be here anymore and I don't want to do this. And I always thought I would get a call like after that, you know, either if it's a sympathy call or just like a genuine, you know, care call. I never heard
some
from them
acknowledgement of what happened.
So, which, you know, probably for the best, but anyways. And then, you know, after that, I was just like, you know, I'm going to have to start wearing sunscreen. I'm really going to have to pay attention, you know, when I am outside running, you know, am I wearing protective clothing? What time of day am I going outside, you know, spending outdoors? And then I also just felt really inspired to share what happened to me because, mind you, I didn't tell anybody that this happened to me. I told my parents when they finally got back from vacation, welcome home, I have cancer. That was a fun conversation. and then
especially because as you mentioned, your dad had just gone through it a month before, which you're going to share more about, but that's really back to back.
Right, exactly. So, and my mom felt really bad and she didn't realize that mine was worse than my dad's at the time. Yeah. So it was very weird how the timing worked out with that. And I only told my coworker because I had to take some time off work with appointments and stuff and my boss, but that's really the only people that knew because again, I think it was going back to that shame that I felt because people knew I was tanning because I was tan in the winter months and that's not normal. And people would compliment my tan, but I had some folks in my life that knew it wasn't good. And so I felt as if, you know, if I shared this news of what happened to me, I didn't know the response I would get. I don't know if people would say, well, you should have known, you know, that you were doing something wrong. Of course you can get skin cancer. You know, I was just going through this like negative spiral of the feedback I would receive if I did start to share what happened to me. And so that's when I went down the social media rabbit hole of like searching all these hashtag melanoma, hashtag, you know, skin cancer survivor, you know, all this kind of stuff. And I found people like you, Jen. I found people like, you know, all other, you know, melanoma warriors on Instagram that we're all friends with now and in our community. And I thought to myself, you know, if they can post their journey and be brave enough to share their scars and share their story and share what happened to them, so can I. And so I took a photo of my surgery site, which was, I guess, should have had a trigger warning at the time. It was kind of graphic, depending on your queasiness level. And then I posted a long post about what happened. And to this day, even back, you know, since 2019, when I posted that at the end of that year, it's still the photo that has received the most comments and likes and support because I think people appreciate vulnerability and they appreciate stories that aren't always just, you know, about the happy things in life. They appreciate real stories. They appreciate people being really transparent about something that they may not want to talk about or share, but they know that sharing it could impact somebody in a positive way. And ever since I did that, I never turned back. So, and then I just got super involved after that. I mean, I got involved with melanoma organizations and, you know, I got involved with, you know, connecting with other survivors and fighters of all stages. And it was really special to have that experience. I don't know if you want me to stop there or start talking about my dad, because that's kind of where my dad's story comes into play. But you tell me, Jen.
Yeah, well, we've talked about this before, but my story and your story are actually very similar. Where, I mean, even back to the very beginning, I used to joke, even a handful of months before I was diagnosed, that I'm the poster child for skin cancer because I have blonde hair, blue eyes, fair skin. And thinking about that now, I mean, I would say that word for word and I cringe, but I just never thought that it would happen to me. And that's kind of what I was saying with that statement. It was making light of something that really shouldn't have ever been taken lightly. I made a lot of the same mistakes. I would tan, I would use tanning beds. I had a vacation down in Mexico where I fell asleep in the sun and got extremely sunburned. And it is hard to not put that blame on yourself and to feel some of the shame and things like that. Um, I wouldn't say that I hid it at first, but I also didn't advertise it. And I had a lot of internalizing both, well, I probably did this to myself, but then also being stage 1 and seeing people who are stage 4, like, how do I share my story when their situations have been worse? And feeling I was making comparisons that luckily in the skin cancer and really the entire cancer community don't do. And it took a while to realize that all of these stories matter. And that's really why I like that you share yours and your dad's, because we can see both sides and it's impacting everybody. And there's somebody that needs to see your story no matter what stage you're at.
Yeah. No, that's so true. That's so true. We always think, oh, well, there's somebody, worse out there, or, and that doesn't mean that what happened to you doesn't matter. And, for my dad, I guess a good segue into, talking a little bit about him. So I mentioned that before I had my stage 1 diagnosis, he had a stage 0. And for those of you watching and listening, stage 0 is basically you get it cut out and then they're monitoring you it's up to your dermatologist. It could be every 3 months or 6 months after that. But the stages are depending on how deep the level of the deep the cancer is within the layer of the skin, and if it is spread to the organs or the lymph nodes or what have you, whether it's stage 1, 2, 3, or 4. So in January of 2021, which this is the wild part of everything, I really started getting involved with melanoma organizations at the later end of 2020 and really wanting to share my story and talk about what I went through. Then in January of 2021, at the end of the month, I got a call that my dad had a seizure while he was driving with my mom, thank God. And he had to be life flighted to a hospital and a bunch of tests were run. And they found lesions in his brain, and the brain lesions were causing the seizure. And they didn't know exactly what lesions they were. So they decided to do a full body scan, and then they found lesions in his lungs and compared, do we take a biopsy of the brain or take a biopsy of the lung? They opted for the lung because they never want to touch the brain unless they absolutely have to. And so they speculated that the lesions in his brain resembled metastatic melanoma, which when we heard that news, it was shocking because we're like, wait, how is his melanoma back? Or is this different melanoma? We were just very confused. But they weren't able to give us a full answer until they could match what the appearance of the lung lesions looked like compared to the brain lesions. And so they did the lung biopsy. It came back metastatic melanoma, and they just kind of put 2 and 2 together, and they deemed him as stage 4 metastatic in the brain and the lungs. And that was a lot of information to swallow. And mind you, when this all was happening, it was still pretty much at the height of COVID. I wasn't even allowed to see my dad in the hospital. It was just one person. And my dad was in the ICU because of the seizure, what was going on. And it was just a really scary time. Thankfully, he finally got out of the hospital, and, he got all these appointments scheduled with an oncologist, and to really start talking about like next steps with treatment. So my dad, ever since February, all through 2021 and 2022, he underwent a series of immunotherapy, which for those of you listening is similar to chemotherapy. Chemotherapy, though, it is drugs that attack the cancer, whereas immunotherapy is drugs that build up the immune system for the immune system to attack the cancer. Different technique. Both can be beneficial in different ways, but they're seeing for melanoma, immunotherapy has been a very good treatment for advanced melanoma, such as my father's. He also underwent, with his brain lesions, gamma knife radiation, which is targeted therapy to treat multiple small lesions, whereas for folks that have larger lesions in the brain, they may be able to have surgery. My dad's lesions are not large enough, so they're inoperable. So he had to opt for the radiation. So he had around 7 rounds of radiation in 2021, and then he was on the combo treatment, so a Opdivo Yervoy immunotherapy treatment. He had 4 rounds of that, which there was a lot of hospitalizations in between because it's a very toxic immunotherapy treatment drug concoction cocktail that he underwent, but he got through it. And then after the 4, he had to, after that, complete monthly, just one of the 2 drugs, the Nevo. So the goal was for him to complete all 24 treatments. However, just recently, last December, they had to stop immunotherapy treatment because it was creating a lot of lung inflammation in his lungs. And they finally, actually, as of yesterday, thankfully found out that the lung inflammation is not due to cancer progression. It is due to the side effects of the immunotherapy for so many months. So from a melanoma standpoint, my dad is doing better. Both his brain lesions and lung lesions have either shrunk or stayed stable or completely dissolved. He has multiple in both organs. He has around, I think, 12 in the brain and around 15 in the lungs. Sometimes they look a little larger than, they kind of fluctuate the sizes depending on if there's swelling or inflammation or what have you. But his oncologist is saying that he is on the right path and is going in a good direction. He has been responding to treatment. The things that we are now dealing with currently are all of the side effects from the cancer treatment. So the lung inflammation, he unfortunately also last year and the year before was dealing with a lot of brain swelling, where he had to be on very severe steroids that had a lot of complications and other side effects that unfortunately killed his adrenal system. So now he is probably going to be on another form of steroids the rest of his life. And this lung inflammation, at this time, we are just monitoring it. He's going to just keep going in for scans. There will be another steroid option for this type of inflammation if it's necessary, because ultimately, if this inflammation gets worse, it also could be deadly. So they're just kind of, he's on monitor mode as of right now. But, it's been a very wild journey the last couple of years. As you can imagine, I experienced the beginning stages of melanoma, and I'm seeing and I'm living through somebody to see the end stages of melanoma. And it's scary. And I've learned a lot throughout the way. I've learned a lot of things I never thought I'd learn. But what I have learned that I think is the most important thing is how important it is to take care of your body, how important it is to take care of your skin, and how important it is to really appreciate the small things in life and the small wins, especially when you're dealing with a stage 4 cancer patient that is a parent. There have been parts in the last couple of years where I had to take on an unexpected caregiving role to a parent that I was never close with before this. And that also kind of played a toll on my mental health and really navigating, what does this all look like? When I'm dealing with my own mental health, my own cancer diagnosis, and then now dealing with, working on a relationship with my dad and, his cancer diagnosis. A lot was going on, but I will say I am grateful that he is still here, and we have grown much closer the last couple of years. And I think that's been a motivator and a driver for me to be such a strong advocate, because I love sharing the both sides of the melanoma, the stage 1 and the stage 4 and all in between. But it's just so important. And I do it because I never want anybody to go through what I went through and what my dad is currently going through. So that's my story.
Well, first, I want to say I really appreciate the update on your dad as well, because I know a lot of people that, especially in the L.U.V community, with you being an ambassador, but then just in the melanoma community as a whole, you've been sharing both your story and your dad's. And so people have been following and are really invested. So it's good to hear that there's some good news in a really tough situation. But I think his story also just highlights how complex melanoma is, especially when we go back to the beginning and he was diagnosed stage 0. And a lot of times there's that misconception that like skin cancer is like, oh, it's just skin cancer. They scrape it off, you're good. And no cancer, even any of the other types of skin cancer, are just cancer. But melanoma is super complex and very dangerous. Things change very quickly. And even one of my dermatologists has said when it comes down to it, like catching melanoma, it's very much a guessing game, because it takes one cell, like with your dad's stage 0, they still don't even know if it was a new melanoma or if it's a cell that just got missed, and there's not really any way to find that. So melanoma is such a complex thing, and I think that really highlights also the importance of sharing a lot of the different stories, because the more education out there, the better. And I honestly feel like it's those of us who have been through it as either patients, survivors, caregivers, or some combination of all of the above. Like, we really are the ones putting the most education and advocacy out there right now.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I know you probably get these messages a lot, Jen, but some people will message me and I look at their profile and I'm like, okay, so who is this person? And they aren't sharing their cancer story, but they will message me and talk to me about it, because they'll tell me, I don't have the courage yet, to talk about this or to share my story. And that's totally okay. But even the people that aren't sharing it, like, they will support you and like privately share with you their story. And I even still think that matters, having that conversation. And, so yeah, I think our stories are definitely spreading awareness and also just spreading encouragement too, because I'm sure you also agree, Jen, I don't have a lot of friends, like, this sounds weird, but like I have a lot of friends like over social media, digitally and virtually, where I can talk about this stuff. I don't have a lot of like physical friends like down the road from me or in the next zip code that I can just meet up with and talk about skin cancer, unfortunately. But I think that's the power of social media too. And, sharing our stories that way. Because unfortunately, my family and friends, I never want them to experience this, but unfortunately they don't understand the severity of melanoma. I mean, I get monthly messages about, wow, like skin cancer can spread to your brain. It can spread to your spleen. I'm like, yes, it can. It is cancer, just like any other type of cancer, like spreads. Melanoma and skin cancer can do that as well. And, that's why I always try to share my story, but I'm also sharing that the credible information, from other organizations that are doing the research and doing the studies and the treatments and all that kind of stuff. I'm also making sure I'm spreading that knowledge out there too, because it's so important. I think having that mixture of like our own experiences with like the factual information, having that like on our pages, the more people that are doing that, the better, and the more people are just going to be better educated, and our future generations, like starting this with your kids young and teaching youth and having this in the schools. I mean, I can go on and on. If I was in charge, if I was the president, I'd have a sun safety plan in every school.
Yeah, but I mean, it brings up a really good point because I think with melanoma, it's not even a lot of things, there's misinformation out there. But with melanoma and skin cancer, it isn't even that there's misinformation, it's just that there isn't a lot of information in general. And then what is out there, you almost have to go look for it because it's not getting the attention it deserves. And so that's why it's the combinations, it's the stories that make it personal, and that's what people connect with and relate with. And when people like you and I and other LUV ambassadors are able to be vulnerable and put that out there, and then they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know this could happen, and then mixing in that actual factual information with organizations like the Melanoma Research Foundation and stuff like that. Which you also talked about how you do work with a couple of UPF clothing lines. Obviously, L.U.V, low ultraviolet, is one of them, but then also do a lot of work with both the Melanoma Research Foundation and Impact Melanoma. So I know that you have said you're a mental health and a skin cancer advocate. What does advocacy mean to you, and why is that work so meaningful to you?
Advocacy just means to me standing up for not only what you believe in, but like speaking your own truth, I think is really important as well. And using your voice for maybe some people that don't feel like they have one, or they don't feel like they can find theirs yet and really use their voice. So yeah, I'm very passionate about, sun safety advocacy, skin cancer, melanoma advocacy. And I love supporting organizations where that is one of their main priorities within their mission. You can tell when organizations are mission driven, and the two that you just mentioned, MRF, Melanoma Research Foundation, and Impact Melanoma, are significantly mission driven. And a lot of what they do is they're always incorporating survivor stories and fighter stories into everything that they do, their programs, their resources, their information, their social media pages. And, they really care about really getting the word out, and, also making sure that, the bills that are and the laws that are being passed and instituted in this country are also benefiting, people and their skin and their health and their organs. I know MRF does a lot of work on an advocacy level, both, locally in DC, but, nationally, they're trying to do a lot of work, which is awesome. And Impact Melanoma, I mean, the work that they do with the sunscreen stations and the Your Skin is In program, and the program, the name is escaping me, the one where they're educating tattoo artists and beauticians and barbers, to what to look for. I mean, those are the people that are seeing this stuff, and they need to be educated. So it's just been so cool, and, meeting their staff and really getting to know their community and meeting more survivors. And I just love meeting all new types of people and getting to know all the different organizations and kind of what they do. They're all similar, but they're also different, and they all offer certain things. So I've been really fortunate to work with a lot of them and do different things at, all of them, which has been really, really cool.
I also love the way that you define advocacy, because I think a lot of times being an advocate or advocacy, we think there's this bigger meaning and that it's hard to get into and hard to do. but just simply sharing your story or sharing information on social media is such a small way to do it. And just sharing your truth and getting information out there and giving a voice to people that, like you said, either aren't ready or don't have one makes such a big impact. What is the biggest change that you would like to see in regards to skin cancer and skincare in the future?
I would love to see the rates of skin cancer significantly decrease. I think that would be great. I think the Skin Cancer Foundation actually just released the 2023 statistics. I do not know the exact number, but I believe the case number has gone down, but the death number has gone up, which that is telling me that we still have a lot of work to do in research and treatment for this cancer, just like any other cancer. And that is why advocacy is so important, because there's a lot of funding that's behind these research and clinical trials and treatments that are currently going on behind the scenes. They need funding and support for that. And if we're not, as survivors and fighters, using our voice and sharing our stories, the more people that do it, the more people are aware of the problem. For example, look how much attention COVID-19 got in the last couple of years, and everybody was talking about it. A lot of people are affected by it. It was something that we couldn't not look at. That is what I would hope one day in the future. I guess to answer your question, I hope that skin cancer gets that kind of attention. And I don't want a lot of people to get sick and die from it, but I want it to be the forefront, and I want people to care about it. That is what my hope would be. And as far as my, hope for skincare, I would hope that as much as people use soap and water, they use sunscreen. They're using the sunscreen that they will remember to put on, whether that's chemical or mineral, whether that's, glossy or within your makeup or however you want to do it. I hope you're using it every single day like you would soap and water. And that would really be my hope for the future.
Yeah, there's so many great sunscreens out there now, and they're not that thick, white, just coated, slimy, sticky stuff that we think of from back when we were kids and your parents are slathering all over you at the beach. So many great options that barely even feel like you're wearing anything at this point.
Yeah, I actually, I went on a run before this, and you can kind of still tell I'm actually using the L.U.V sunscreen chapstick when I go out on my runs, and I absolutely love it. I use the coconut one, and like it is a little bit more white, but for me, I guess it would be different for everybody's lips because we're all, different skin tones and colors and all that kind of stuff. But for me, it looks like a pretty lavender, lipstick. And so I actually kind of the other day I went for a work meeting. I actually put a little on just to give me that little tint.
Like a lip gloss.
I'm sun safety too, and lip color. So I'm a big fan of that. So I'm actually wearing some right now that I love. There's so many different products these days, Jen, to your point, where they're incorporating more SPF into it. And I'm noticing it's a higher SPF. Years ago, it was just SPF 5, 10, or 15. But now I'm starting to see skin products that you use for makeup that have SPF 30. And even I saw one that was 50 the other day. And I was like, this is amazing. This is what should be, the more SPF in these products. So yeah, I'm hopeful that we are continuing to go in a good direction with that.
Yeah, it's also really cool to see there's a lot of sunscreen companies that are also making makeup that has UPF in it too. So we can find it not just in the sunscreen and moisturizers, but also clothing, makeup, and it's reached the UPF or SPF is getting higher, but also the ways that we can protect our skin are just getting more advanced, and there's a lot more available, which will hopefully bring prices down too.
Yeah.
So Leah, thank you so much for sharing your story. For anyone who's listening, where can they find you and connect and learn more?
Yeah, I think the best platform would probably be Instagram. That's where I'm probably the most active. So I'm at the Leah Alexis on Instagram, and you can follow my journey, my story, and also keep in touch with also my dad's story too.
Perfect. Thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Thank you for having me.